Now, I know none of my colleagues on the other side of the aisle will admit to being racist, and I don't think they are. But when you look at the rhetoric and you hear the talking points and look at the legislation that's put forward, what are we to say?
DeSantis doesn't have a shot.
45,
he's a white
45.
nationalist.
Oh, stop that.
He's a
Jamal.
nationalist.
No,
he's a
not.
white supremacist.
No, he's not, man.
He's anti-gay.
No,
he's
not.
anti-woman.
No,
he's anti-black.
Listen,
there's no way he can be president.
The trans community isn't bothering you. Let them live. Why are Republicans so uncomfortable with this? Let them be who they are. That's it. They're not bothering you. They're not taking your lunch money. They're not criminalizing your communities. They're not engaging in gun violence. They just want to live and be happy like everyone else. And they are contributing members to society, whether it's through education, sports, the economy, or anything else. Much of this anti-immigrant rhetoric and policy is aligned to something called the Great Replacement Theory, which was condemned by this Congress in last Congress, and I am proud to be the author of that resolution. The Great Replacement Theory states that the white race is under attack by blacks, Jews, and immigrants, and we must do something about it. And many of the mass shooters in our country have identified the Great Replacement Theory as being the motivating factor to their mass shooting, including the Buffalo mass shooting in upstate New York. So the hateful, divisive rhetoric is in the resolution. The hateful, divisive rhetoric is a part of one of the amendments. The hateful, divisive rhetoric is historical as per redlining, and the anti-immigrant sentiment is directly connected to the Great Replacement Theory.
I want to remind the gentleman that you cannot engage in characterizing the other members' positions or calling their position, engaging in personality characterizations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's just very frustrating because it seems like the legislation itself engages in personalities when it refers to a group of people that is derogatory. So if the legislation is doing it, and we're using words on the other side of the aisle like invasion, as if it's an army coming to our country, is that not personalities? Thank you, and I yield back. We have an ugly history of discriminating against people who are different than we are throughout our time in this country, whether they are Black, Latino, Asian, LGBTQ, poor, people with disabilities, women. We have an ugly history of discrimination in this country. And now the trans community is the target. What the heck who are we as Americans and as a human race to be so darn uncomfortable with an individual or group of people that's different from who we are? From the beginning of American history, as we got our stuff together, as we tried to, we invited people from all over the world to help us build the nation that we have now. And we continue to try to evolve into the nation that we're capable of being. And no one should be left out of that, especially not the trans community, which is the most vulnerable community right now in our country. Ms. Jayapal already shared some of the data, as did Ms. Bonamici, and as did Mr. Takano. I just want my Republican colleagues to just take a breath, stop, relax. The trans community isn't bothering you. Let them live. Just like you want your friends and family to live and have freedom and have rights and have choice, let the trans community have the same thing. Thank you, and I yield back. I want to zoom out for a moment because the Republican proposed budget seeks to cut $4.5 trillion overall, which will obviously have a huge impact on education. And while Republicans continue to speak about these budget cuts, they do not also speak about increased spending to invest more in our children and our families. We have a current economic system where two of the wealthiest Americans own more wealth than the bottom 50% of the country combined. So the wealthy are not contributing their fair share, and large corporations are not contributing their fair share, whereas at the same time, we're talking about budget cuts. So we're not having honest, holistic, comprehensive conversations. And it seems the Republican Party, is going through a sort of cognitive dissonance, where on the one hand, they're speaking about caring about student learning, whereas on the other hand, their budget proposal will cut hundreds of thousands of teachers from our classrooms. On the one hand, they're speaking about caring about student mental health, where on the other hand, their budget proposal will cut thousands of mental health professionals from being in our schools. Their budget would also cut the arts and music and sports programs, not just in the Bronx and Mount Vernon in my district, but also in Arkansas, Ohio, Michigan, Florida, and will hurt not just urban black and brown kids, but rural white kids as well. Rural white kids love music. They would love to learn how to play an instrument. They would love to have theater, drama, and arts programs in their schools, and they would love to participate in a holistic, comprehensive education program. But unfortunately, because local property taxes fund our schools more than anything else, wealthy kids continue to get the things that poor rural kids do not get and poor urban kids do not get. At the same time, they want to cut SNAP benefits. They want to cut $4 billion from Title I schools. These are the poorest, most vulnerable people. If we put them in desperate situations, they will turn to doing something that will harm their community, which is crime. Their budget also cuts hundreds of thousands of law enforcement officers. So now we don't have the resources to respond to our kids on the front end or the back end, and we're leaving our families to suffer. My question is this: speak to us about the impact of these cuts and how they'll contribute to the school to prison pipeline, and talk about how community schools can be a response to that.
Sure. You know,
The gentleman has 20 seconds.
as the president said, show me your budget and I'll show you your values. It costs more to intervene and incarcerate than it does to educate. We're either going to pay now or pay later. We need to invest in our children and invest in our country.
Thank you, and I yield back.